I almost didn't go back for it. The morning had been rushed. Coffee half finished. Keys grabbed off the hook in a hurry, and me already halfway down the driveway when I realized my phone wasn't in my bag. I stood there for a second, debating whether I even needed it. My appointment with my nutritionist wasn't until 11. I could survive an hour without it. But my brother had said he'd call before noon with updates about our mom's property paperwork, and I couldn't miss that. So I turned around, walked back up the front steps, and used my key to let myself in quietly. Mostly because my husband had mentioned he had a work call early that morning, and I didn't want to interrupt. The front door barely made a sound when I pushed it open. That's the only reason I heard it. My husband's voice was coming from the kitchen, low but not low enough. And the voice on the other end of the phone, coming through the speaker loud and clear, was one I had known my entire life. It was my best friend. I need you to understand something before I go any further. She wasn't just my best friend in the casual sense. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. She was the person I called at 2 a.m. when my father had his stroke. She was the one who held my hand in the waiting room. We had been friends since we were 9 years old. 23 years. I stood completely still in the entryway, one hand still on the door, and I listened. My husband said, "The policy is worth $800,000. I already checked. As long as it looks like an accident, there's no investigation." She said, "And you're sure the timing works?" "You said she's been stressed. People would believe it." He said she's been complaining about chest pains for weeks. She's already got a cardiologist appointment next month. If something happens before that, who's going to question it? I stopped breathing. She said, "What about her brother? He's going to ask questions." My husband said, "Let him. Grieving husbands don't get questioned. They get casseroles." And then she laughed. I heard my best friend of 23 years laugh at that. I don't know how long I stood there. It might have been 30 seconds. It might have been 3 minutes. All I know is that at some point my body made a decision before my brain did, and I stepped back out the front door as quietly as I had come in, pulled it shut behind me without letting it click, and walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and I did not scream. I did not cry. I just stared at the steering wheel and let the information settle into me like cold water. My husband wanted me dead. My best friend was helping him plan it, and they were going to use my heart against me. Let me back up, because you need the full picture. My husband and I had been married for 4 years. We met when I was 28. He was charming, attentive, the kind of man who remembered what you ordered at a restaurant and showed up with your favorite flowers on a random Tuesday. My mother loved him. My brother thought he was a little too smooth but kept his mouth shut because he saw how happy I seemed. For the first 2 years, I was happy, or I thought I was. The chest pain started about 18 months ago. Nothing dramatic at first, just a tightness, a flutter, like my heart was reminding me it was there. I mentioned it to my doctor during a routine visit, and she referred me to a cardiologist. The cardiologist ran tests and told me I had a condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, HCM. It's a thickening of the heart muscle. Most people live completely normal lives with it. It just means I need to be monitored, avoid extreme physical stress, and take my medication consistently. My husband had sat in that appointment with me. He'd held my hand. He'd asked the doctor questions. He'd driven me home and made soup from scratch. Now I was sitting in my car realizing that at some point between that doctor's appointment and this morning, he had looked at my diagnosis and seen a window. I also need to tell you about the insurance policy. My husband had suggested we each take out life insurance policies about a year into our marriage. He'd framed it as responsible adulting. We're building a life together. We should protect each other. I had agreed without thinking much about it. $800,000 with him as the sole beneficiary. I had thought that was love. Apparently it was motive. Now, and this is the part where I was different from what he expected. I did not go to the police that morning and beg someone to believe me with no evidence. I had heard that story too many times. I knew how it ended. Instead, I drove to a pharmacy 2 towns over, bought a small digital voice recorder, the kind journalists use, paid cash, and drove back home. I timed it carefully. His work call was supposed to go until 10. I was back by 9:40. I let myself in again, went straight to the bedroom, and hid the recorder behind the headboard, flush against the wall. Then I grabbed my phone off the kitchen counter, said a breezy, "Good morning, just forgot this," to my husband, who was still on his laptop, kissed him on the cheek, and left. He smiled at me. He actually smiled. I drove to a park 3 miles away, sat on a bench, and called my brother. My brother and I are close, in the way that people who survived a difficult childhood together are close. Not always talking, but always there. He's 34, works in property management, and he has a very calm way of handling bad news that I have always depended on. When I told him what I had heard, he went silent for a long time. Then he said, "Tell me exactly what you need." I told him. He didn't argue, didn't say, "Are you sure?" Didn't suggest I might have misheard. He just said, "Okay, when?" We made a plan. For the next 5 days, I went home every evening and acted like everything was normal. I cooked dinner. I asked my husband about his day. I laughed at his jokes. I let him think that I was still the woman who didn't know anything, the woman with the bad heart who trusted him completely. Every morning, I checked the recorder. On day 2, I got nothing useful. On day 3, I hit gold. He was on the phone again, this time in the home office with the door half closed. The recorder caught everything. He was talking to my best friend about the medication, specifically about what would happen if I accidentally doubled my dosage. He'd apparently looked it up. He said the combination of my HCM medication and a high dose of a common blood pressure drug could cause a cardiac event that would look entirely natural. He told her which medication. He told her how much. He said, "I just need to switch it out once. That's all it takes." She said, "Make sure you're out of the house." I sat in my car in the driveway and listened to that recording 4 times. Each time I felt something inside me go very, very still. On day 4, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a family law attorney who had been recommended to me years ago by a colleague and whose name I had stored in my phone under a different contact name ever since because something in me had apparently always known that I might need it. I told her I needed an emergency consultation. She fit me in the same afternoon. I brought the recorder. I watched her face change as she listened. She said, "This is a criminal matter, not just a civil one. Have you contacted law enforcement?" I said, "I want to do this right. I want it to be airtight." She said, "Then here's what we're going to do." We filed for a protective order that same afternoon. She also contacted a detective she had worked with before, someone who specialized in domestic cases, and we arranged a meeting for the following morning. I handed over the recorder and gave a full recorded statement. The detective listened to everything without interrupting, and when I finished, she didn't look skeptical. She looked focused. She said, "I want you to go home tonight and act like nothing has changed. Can you do that one more time?" I said yes. That night was the hardest one. My husband made pasta for dinner. He poured me a glass of wine. He sat across the table from me and talked about a trip he wanted to take. Somewhere warm, he said. Maybe in the spring. He described the hotel. He described the beach. I smiled and said it sounded wonderful. I went to bed that night and stared at the ceiling and thought about how it was possible to share a life with someone and not know them at all. We had a joint bank account. His clothes were hanging in my closet. His contact was listed as home in my phone. I thought about my best friend. I thought about all the times I had told her things I hadn't told anyone else. Fears, embarrassments, the private thoughts that only a lifelong friendship earns. And I thought about how she had taken all of that and handed it to him. Or maybe she had always known. Maybe they had been together long before I suspected anything. I fell asleep eventually. I don't know how. The next morning, I got up early, made coffee, and while my husband was in the shower, I went to the medicine cabinet. I found the bottle he had been talking about, the blood pressure medication I occasionally took for mild hypertension. I took a photo of the bottle, the dosage, the prescription label. Then I replaced it with an identical bottle I had purchased and brought home in my bag the night before. The replacement was exactly what it was supposed to be, nothing more. Whatever he had been planning to put in the original bottle, or whatever he had already done to it, would now be evidence in a sealed bag with the detective. I left for work at my normal time. I was 2 blocks away when the detective called and told me they had executed the warrant. I pulled over on a side street and I sat there and I let myself shake for about 60 seconds. Just 60 seconds. Then I took a breath, put the car in drive, and went to work. I got through the day in pieces. My coworkers noticed I was quiet. I told them I had a headache. Around 2 in the afternoon, my brother texted me a single word, "done." That was our code. It meant the financial piece was handled. 3 days before all of this, while I had still been gathering evidence, I had met with a financial advisor and begun the process of separating my accounts. I had also contacted the insurance company and initiated a beneficiary change, moving my policy to my brother as the sole beneficiary. That process required a form, a signature, and a waiting period, but the request was filed, dated, and documented. My husband no longer stood to gain anything from my death. By the time the detective knocked on our front door that morning, there was nothing left for him to take. He was arrested on a Tuesday. My best friend was arrested the same afternoon at her apartment across town. I heard she tried to say it had all been theoretical, that they were just talking, just hypothetically, just venting. The detective told me later she said that 3 times before her lawyer arrived and told her to stop talking. Theoretical. 23 years of friendship, and that was the word she chose. The weeks that followed were not easy. I want to be honest about that because I think people sometimes expect a clean ending. The villain goes to jail, and the protagonist walks out into sunlight, and everything is fine. That's not how it felt. It felt like walking through fog. I went home to an empty house and I sat in rooms that still smelled like his cologne, and I ate cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row because cooking for one felt like a thing I hadn't learned yet. My brother came and stayed with me for 2 weeks. He slept on the couch and didn't push me to talk, but he was there every morning when I came downstairs. That mattered more than I knew how to say. I went to my cardiologist appointment, the one my husband had been counting on me not making it to. She adjusted my medication, told me my numbers actually looked better than last year, and asked if I was managing my stress levels. I almost laughed. I started therapy. Not because someone told me to, but because I woke up one morning and realized I had been waiting for something to feel real, and it wasn't happening on its own. The preliminary hearing was in March. I sat in the courtroom and watched my husband be escorted in, and the first thing I noticed was that he looked exactly the same. Same face, same posture. He had always been good at looking like someone trustworthy. He didn't look at me. My best friend was at a separate hearing. I didn't attend that one. I don't know if I'll ever be able to sit in the same room as her without feeling the floor disappear under me. That might change. I'm not there yet. The charges included conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with medication, and financial fraud. Because the detectives' team found evidence that my husband had taken out an additional secret policy on my life through a different company, naming a shell account as the beneficiary. He had been planning this for longer than I knew, maybe from the beginning. I'll never know exactly when the man I married became something else, or whether that man ever actually existed. Here's what I do know. I know that the morning I forgot my phone, something shifted in my favor for the first time. I know that I did not fall apart when I had every reason to. I know that I called my brother and told him the truth instead of convincing myself I had misheard. I know that I sat across a dinner table from a man who was planning to kill me, and I did not flinch. I know that I am still here. My lawyer told me the case is strong. The detective told me the case is strong. I try not to think too far ahead because I've learned that certainty is a thing that can be taken from you in a morning while you're rushing out the door and forgetting your phone. What I focus on instead is smaller. The coffee I make now exactly the way I want it, with no one commenting on how strong it is. The silence in my apartment at night that used to feel like loneliness and is slowly starting to feel like something else, something closer to peace. The cardiologist who told me my heart, the one they had been counting on to fail me, is actually doing fine. It turns out my heart was stronger than any of them expected. I want to say one thing to anyone watching this who has felt that first cold drop of suspicion. That moment where something small doesn't add up and you almost talk yourself out of it. Don't. Your instincts are not dramatic. They are not overreacting. They are data. The morning I walked back through that front door, I had a choice. I could have convinced myself I had misheard. I could have stayed quiet to keep the peace. I could have spent months slowly doubting my own perception until there was nothing left of my own judgment to trust. Instead, I listened, and then I moved. I take my medication every morning at 7. I keep my cardiologist appointments. I call my brother on Sundays. I go to therapy on Thursdays. I am 29 years old, and I am building a life that belongs entirely to me. And every single day, that feels like enough.